Chapter 17. The bar was packed, every table filled, every seat at the bar, and standing room in the back. When the exclusive tickets had gone on sale that morning for this impromptu concert, they'd been sold within 10 minutes. At this bar, Beau had come to listen to Tag after seeing a YouTube video of him. The rest, as they both like to say, had been history. Tonight they had promised a sneak peek at some of the new songs going on the album and a healthy dose of Taggart Dubois nostalgia. Tag figured the rough edges to his heart would make for a stunning performance, maybe one of his best yet. But as he sat backstage preparing, he had the urge to just go home, sit in his bedroom, and play his guitar until the hurt went away. He took a deep breath to channel it. He sang the song he'd started working on the night he came home from Wyoming, humming through the parts he wasn't quite sure on yet. By the time Beau pushed open the door to the small dressing room, he was ready to go. The fans at the bar went wild when Tag stepped on the stage, and he grinned at the fact that about 75% of the audience was female. Maybe dating more seriously than he had been in the past would be a good idea. He'd taken women out on a regular basis. But his rigorous schedule and half of his heart still belonging to Roxy made relationships difficult. He could still have the family he'd dreamed of having with Roxy. He'd just have to take a slight turn on the path he'd thought he was headed down. He started out with the promise he'd made to give them a peek at some of the new songs, skipping Front Porch, as he dubbed the newest song he'd written for Roxy, instead singing one with a nod to Bellamy's Biscuits in the second verse. The excitement in the room practically jumped on the stage and engulfed him, propelling him through the rest of the song and into an old favorite, one he'd written at just 16, that had proven to be his biggest hit to date. He'd sang it enough that usually he could croon lyrics about Roxy without bringing her to mind, but not tonight. Words about the way she smiled and how she didn't know how much he stared at her threatened to choke him. It brought out a raspy quality to his voice that made a few women in the audience cry out. When Tag had first gone to Little River, he expected to at least come away with his best music ever, even if he didn't succeed in winning Roxy back. Maybe it was the fact that he'd come so close, closer than he'd expected, that made this harder than any time since Laramie. Maybe having a daily dose of her was more potent than he'd expected. In any case, things were going to be raw for him for longer, harder to package away, as this would be great for songwriting. He just had to get through it. He chose some high-energy songs next, with the standard country life lyrics, keeping the excitement high while staying away from the hardest memories. On a stage in front of thousands, the emotions churning through him might have been to his advantage, but in the intimacy of only 100 or so fans, it caught him off guard. He couldn't ignore all the requests they shouted at him, though, which led to another song from his second album, the one he'd written after Laramie, charged with more pain and clearly a breakup song. He had to get off the stage and possibly spend a few days holed up at the farm rather than spending another long day at the studio. He'd underestimated what this breakup had done to him and his ability to power through. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he said when he'd finished, and a groan of disappointment echoed through the room. "You all know this place means a great deal to me." The cheers gave way, which was a relief, and the crowd reluctantly accepted the end had come. "One more," came a shout from the back that gripped his heart for a second. The voice had sounded like Roxy's, enough to convince him to pack it up as quickly as possible. Hallucinating, thanks to a broken heart, was a new one for Tag, but he bet it would make for some awesomely painful lyrics. Others echoed the woman's request, and Tag cast a pleading look at Beau, who sat at the end of the bar nearest to Tag. But his manager wasn't even looking at him. Instead, he squinted into the darkness of the bar, his expression surprised. The crowd shouted song requests, and Tag took a deep breath, prepared to give a heartfelt apology and get away. Then a voice rang out, the same one who started the call for an encore. "How about Roxy's song?" He didn't mistake it that time, didn't hallucinate it. The woman herself stood up from where she sat at a table in the back, and one of the lights at the bar caught her across the face. To his knowledge, this was the first time she'd seen him perform in 8 years, excepting his impromptu concerts at the ranch. "Roxy?" He stepped away from the mic, but it caught enough of her name that several people in the front row turned, and then the whispers started. "Is that her? The Roxy?" And then it turned to cries of, "Sing it! Sing it!" He obliged. How could he not, with her in the crowd? He let loose the full weight of his dreamy voice, as many a female fan had praised him. He didn't know what she was doing there, or why, or if it was a good idea to lay his heart out on the line again for her after so many times, but he did. He sang the original lyrics and improvised a few to include her name, earning some whistles and more soft cries of excitement from the crowd. He couldn't tell in the dim lights, but he'd guess his girl blushed more than a few times at the attention on her. He didn't miss that more than a few people held up cell phones recording the song. When he came to the end, he stepped off the stage and made his way to the back where she still stood, smiling at him in a way he'd only seen once before, that night in Laramie when she was lost in the song and hadn't thought of rejecting him yet. He reached her as he strummed the last few lines, but he stopped before the last line, swinging his guitar around his back as he sang it, and then pulled her into his arms. "What are you doing here?" He had to lean over next to her ear so she'd hear over the cheering filling the bar. "Figured it was about time I heard what all the fuss was about." With that, she clapped a hand around his neck and pulled him toward her lips, as though she couldn't wait another second. Tag wrapped his arms around her, lifting her up off her feet as she kissed him, the whooping around him rising and the rapid clicking of phone cameras. It wasn't the desperate, hungry kiss they'd shared on the porch. This one held promise he recognized that he'd missed in the first one. It held the future, and that made him lighter and happier. He laughed against Roxy's lips. "You thought me singing that song in Little River was bad? This is going to be all over Instagram in a few minutes." She leaned her forehead to his. "All that matters to me is that one person knows how I feel." She leaned up into him, singing softly to his ear. "Let me sit with you on our front porch swing. Sing me to sleep every night. Hold our babies. Hold me. I've never felt anything more right." Tag didn't realize the moment could get any better until he heard his girl's singing voice, sexy and low, in his ear. She had sung along back in high school more than a time or two, and he had known she could carry a tune just fine, but she had never sung just to him. It set everything inside him on fire. "Baby, you are speaking my language." He held her tighter. "About time I learned." Grabbing her hand, he pulled her backstage, waving and grinning as the fans still cheering and everyone chattering and snapping more pictures. When he had pushed the door shut behind him in the dressing room, he shed his guitar and pulled her back into him, kissing her again and nearly falling into the way she kissed him back. Fully, no reservations, no reluctance, no goodbye on the horizon. "Did I just play my last concert?" he asked when he pulled away. She shook her head. No. I still can't ask you to do that, but we can meet halfway. If you cut back your schedule, make Little River home instead of that really pretty farm here, maybe you can keep a house here or something, or that we can stay at when you have to, or maybe you can keep the farm. I don't know. How rich are you?" Happiness broke through Tag, and he couldn't stop the laughter, full of relief, full of excitement, full of the best yet to come. "Are you serious, Rox? You're going to travel with me?" She nodded. "When I can. I won't raise babies on the road, Tag." Her expression turned fierce, and he pulled her close again to reassure her. "I'll miss you when you're gone, but we'll make it work. We'll find compromises. It's not worth it not to." He swept away some hair that had fallen across her face. "I've missed you enough the last 8 years to figure out how to manage it, knowing I get to come home to you always." She tilted her head at him, her expression going sad, enough that he leaned over to kiss it and make it go away, but she held on to his face and stopped him. "I'm sorry. I didn't believe it was real for so long, that I let your career stand between us when it didn't need to. Tag, you've written some beautiful words, and if I would have just listened, I could have saved both of us a lot of hurt." He couldn't help that he cast her a mischievous smile. "I wouldn't be half so famous, darling." He didn't give her a chance to laugh at his fake southern drawl before he kissed her again, a pastime he found he might write at least half a dozen songs about alone. "Then I guess you're welcome," she murmured, and before they got lost in another long-awaited kiss, she whispered, "I love you as big as those mountains we call home, mister. I love you as big as the stars above them, honey."